L'kuta Sichos Chelek Chavav, Yisro Aleph, Lili Nishmas Rabbi Yosef ben Yamin ben Reb Menashe Kaltman. We are also learning the Schus, our dear friend Yosef Shlema ben Risha, for Refuah Shlema Ukreva. Parshas Yisro, of course, has the Aseres Adibris, Anochi Hashem Alekecha. Today we will explore what is the mitzvah of knowing Hashem, as the Rambam talks about it, as the Rebbe explains the Rambam so beautifully. In Minyan HaMitzvahs v'tchilas Sefer HaMishnah Torah, sagt der Rambam, mitzvahs rishona mitzvahs aseh leida she'Hashem Aleka, shenemar anechi Hashem Alekecha. In the beginning of Sefer Mada, the Rambam has Minyan HaMitzvahs, which is a list of all the 613 mitzvahs. Very concise list of all 613 mitzvahs, and he begins that the first mitzvah is to know that there is a Hashem, to know that there is a God, as it says, Anechi Hashem Alekecha. Und der Mitzvah hebt on the Rambam echt die Halacha shem Sifrei Mishnah Torah, and it is this mitzvah, the mitzvah of Yedias Hashem, the knowledge of Hashem, with which the Rambam begins the Sefer Hamada, which is the first Sefer of Mishnah Torah, the 14-volume magnum opus of the Rambam. And he writes as follows: Yesoida, Yesoid is Vamud HaChachmas. It is the foundation of all foundations. It is the pillar of all wisdoms. Leida sheyesh matzirishin, to know that there is an original being, a first existence. Aber in der erste halacha sagt nicht der Rambam as die Idee sheyesh matzirishin as the mitzvah say. What we're focusing on now is that although the Rambam says that it's the foundation and it's the pillar, the Rambam does not use the word mitzvah. When he says this idea to know that there is an original being, the Rambam does not use the word mitzvah. First, in 5 halachas, in 5 paragraphs, the Rambam continues to describe or to tell details about this original being. And only in the 6th halacha does the Rambam conclude that knowing all of this information, these of the last 5 halachas, is a mitzvahs aseh, as it says in Anechi Hashem Alekecha. Von der Fun ist verstandig, as leit Shitas Rambam, is the mitzvah aseh von Anechi Hashem Alekecha, nicht nur die idea bechlal she'Hashem Aleka she'Hashem Mashirishin. From this we can deduce that according to the Rambam, the mitzvah aseh of Anechi Hashem Alekecha is not just the general knowledge that there is a God, or that there is an original being, nor is these kedel pratum wegen welcher rechen tussen die halachas wegen dem Eibishter. To know Hashem doesn't just mean to know that He exists, but to know various details about Him, as the Rambam teaches those details. Und wie der Rabbi is mevar b'sifrei Reish Hamona. Gedacht in Sefer HaMitzvos Tzemach Tzedek, as the Rabbi teaches, and it's brought down by the Tzemach Tzedek, as leit Shitas Rambam is the mitzvah say von ha'amonas elikus, nit mer nit as ha'eleka nimtza bilvad sheyesh eleka nimtza. We're saying a very similar thing, just in different words. The Abarbanel says that the mitzvah of believing in Hashem doesn't just mean to know that there is a God. Because if that would be the case, that would raise an instant question. How does it fit? How does it make sense to list believing in Hashem as a mitzvah? The ganze Linie von a mitzvah is shaykh nor da mitzvah. A mitzvah means a commandment. There can only be a commandment if there is a commander, if there is someone that commands that mitzvah. You can't say there's a mitzvah to believe that there is a commander, because who is giving you that mitzvah? How do you believe in a commander how do you believe in a commandment without having a commander? Automatically, if you're saying there's a mitzvah, automatically it means that you believe there's a mitzvah mitzvahs. So to say that the mitzvah finishes by just believing that there is an elika, that can't be. Nor as elika baruch hu shekvar yadanu shu nimtza. Rather, the Abarbanel says that this Eibishter that we already know exists, is the most original and the most perfect of all existence. The Abarbanel elaborates. So this is similar to what we're saying with the Rambam, that it's not about the knowledge of the existence of Hashem. It's about knowing the details that makes that through which we fulfill this mitzvah. And this is why the Rambam prefaces these 5 halachas with regards to the existence of Hashem, because this mitzvah, which the Rabbi refers to it as Amonas Elokus, which the Rambam refers to it as Yediyas Elokus, which in this case we're saying is the same thing. Further, as it requires one to know the details that the Rambam tells us in order to fulfill this mitzvah. For example, that Hashem is more perfect than any other existence, etc. So the first point of this sikha of Sif Aleph is to know that the Shittas Rambam is that Yediyas Elokus is not just the knowledge that Hashem exists, but also the knowledge of the details. Nochmer, Sif Beis. It's known that there is a precision in the words of the Rambam when he uses the words Leida, to know and not to believe. Ha'amana. So too the Rambam, when he's talking about knowing that the mitzvah of knowing Hashem and the mitzvah of believing in the oneness of Hashem, he uses the term v'yediyas nitva ha'amonas, not just emunah but yediyah, as mitzvah is leida mit yediyah sichlis. So, which is, in other words, the Rambam is implying that this is a mitzvah of to understand, knowing from a place of seichel, not just to believe it. As the Abarbanel answers a question based on this. How can you command someone to believe? It's something that you can't. It's not something that you can want or choose. Either you believe it or you don't. The Rambam is not listing just to believe or how to believe. The Rambam is telling us to know it, and to learn about it, that will bring us to acquire the faith. Which the knowledge and the research and the learning about this information, which does bring to faith when you learn about Hashem and you explore the various details about Hashem, this can bring you to emunah. That is a choice, and that is something that a person could want. So once you say that the mitzvah of believing in Hashem is to learn about Hashem, then it makes sense to make it into a mitzvah. That's something that I could want and I could choose to do, to learn about Hashem. Was der Rambam genug in sich nicht mit sagen, die Praten wegen Metzias Hashem will halachas Aleph sein. Was muss wissen zu bekeisen the mitzvahs von Yediyas Elokus nach Hashem. And this explains why the Rambam doesn't suffice with the information that he gave in the first 6-7 halachas. What a Yid needs to know to fulfill this mitzvah. No, that is noch meidig in die weiterdicke halachas business if a pedek bekam in Yanu b'digei Yediyas Hashem. But the Rambam continues to elaborate on various different details about knowing Hashem. The rayas from Sukkim, as Eina Kadosh Baruch Hu Guf, for example, he brings rayas, proofs from the Psukim that Hashem does not have a corporeal body. As he teared him Gashmi was Kasav B'Teiraf and Eibishten, then Lefidaiton Shel B'nei Adam HaKel Moshel, that the various different physical descriptions about Hashem are actually metaphoric and only to fit the human mind, but are not to be taken literally. When Moshe asks the Eibishter, show me your glory, how Moshe understood the truth of the Eibishter's existence, etc., many other details. Seemingly these details are an exploration of the philosophy of Judaism, not of the halacha part of Judaism, and the Rambam is a sefer of halachas. But according to what we're saying in the beginning of Sif Beis, as this is negiyat from Leida, that it's part of the obligation to know Hashem. It means to know the details about Hashem and to understand the details about Hashem. Demult is the idea Hashem and Nefer from Leida needs to Amunah, not an idea Sichlis, because only if we know the details can we truly understand and have a knowledge of Hashem. Not just Amunah, but idea Sichlis, something that I could process intellectually. And it makes sense why the Rambam continues all the details, because understanding all these details are a part of knowing Hashem. In other words, muss man wissen, akalpanim die Ideas, v'achakidis, v'abchinis, yisedis, v'gemesias Hashem, v'chadram v'zvar in the Perek. In other words, in order to properly fulfill the mitzvah of knowledge of Hashem, we have to know not just the basic details, but also some of these explorations and foundations that the Rambam lists throughout the Perek is all part of knowing Hashem. In other words, it's not just even the details. It's not enough to know the details, but you have to explore the details and understand the details in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Yidiyas Hashem. So to put Sif Aleph and Beis together, number one, is not enough to know that Hashem exists. You have to know various details about Hashem. And number two, it's not enough to know the details. You have to explore and understand those details in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Yidiyas Hashem. As the Makar Rambam. Now the Rebbe says, what is the Makar? What is the source of this Rambam? Aleph, as the mitzvah of Amanas Elokus is Aleph, Nitner Dia Klolis. That number one, it's not enough to have a general knowledge of Hashem's existence, but you have to know the various details about the perfection of the existence of Hashem. And the details have to be understood logically and not just to know them as they are. So what's the makir of this Zayar, of this Rambam? Is from Zayar. Even though the Rambam is a sefer of halachas, but in this specific mitzvah, the Rambam's source is the Zayar. This is what the Zayar says. V'yadaitem ki ani Hashem. Pasuk says, you should know that I am Hashem Elokeichem. Says that Zayar pkuda da kadma lechal pkudim. This is the first mitzvah of all mitzvahs. Leminda le'lekutzbrichu, to know Hashem. To is shlita ilah. There is a supernal ruler. Diu ribein alma, who is the master of the universe. Ubara almin, and created the worlds. Shma kulu, all the worlds. Shmaya v'ara v'chol chilein, the heaven, the earth, and everything that's inside. Is betechani de lashon Zayar. The Rambam's, the words of the Rambam match, even though the Rambam is speaking in Hebrew and the Zayar is speaking in Aramaic, but the meaning of the words match exactly. The Rebbe shows us here the comparison. You say this, the Rambam says the foundation of all foundations, the source of the pillar of all wisdoms. The Zayar says Pkud da kadma. This is the first mitzvah, the chol pkudin of all the mitzvahs. The Rambam says leida sheyesh matzah, to know that there is a first existence. Says the Zayar says liminda le lekoshabrichu, to know Hashem. The Rambam says v'umamtzi kol nimtza. That he created, he brought into being every single existence, and everything that exists in heaven and earth and everything in between is from Hashem. The Zohar says, he created all the worlds, heaven and earth, and everything that's within them. And similarly, when the Rambam says in the fifth halacha that this existence is the God of the world, the master of the universe, this is the Zohar says, the supernal ruler, the master of the world. So we see how the Rambam is basically translating the Zohar from Aramaic into Hebrew, and clearly the Zohar is the Rambam's source. Und von dem Zohar nimmt der Rambam as pekuda da, is verbunden mit das v'yadaitem leminda. And this is why the Rambam, this is the source for the Rambam, that this mitzvah is about knowing, as the Zohar is focusing on the pasuk v'yadaitem, and the Zohar is saying the words leminda. When it says in Masbeka idea klolish it's not enough a general knowledge that Hashem exists. We must know the details about the existence of Hashem. But from Zay first statement as which brings us to understand that Hashem's existence is the first and the most perfect. Oh. Now, just before we conclude this section about proving that the source of the Rambam is the Zohar, The Rebbe clarifies. Nafal piaz the Zer bringt that off the pasuk v'yidaitem kini Hashem lekechem. Unit the pasuk anech Hashem lekechem. Even though the Zer is talking about the pasuk v'yidaitem, which was in Parshas Vayera, and the Rambam is talking about the pasuk anech Hashem lekechem in Parshas Yisro, is kapashut. That could be understood very simply. Weil der Zer that wegen Moshe Rabbeinu v'yaret gelernt mit Yidden wegen Yiddias Hashem. Edes is the Neretz Mitzrayim. The Zer is telling us about Moshe Rabbeinu, how Moshe taught the knowledge of Hashem before they went out of Mitzrayim. So that the Yidden should believe in all of the miracles and all of the strengths that Hashem showed them in Mitzrayim. But thus is given Hashem, which is based on what the pasuk says over there. Moshe said over there, and you will know that I am Hashem, your God. So the Zohar is talking in the context of the story of Moshe Rabbeinu talking to the Yidden going out of Mitzrayim, and therefore the Zohar stelzach on the pasuk v'yadaitem. Aber das was mir darf mekayim sein die mitzvah. The fact that we Jewish people are obligated to fulfill this mitzvah is k'divrei Rambam hayeduyim, as the Rambam says with regards to the mitzvah of bris. Mitzad mitzvah kadosh baruch Hu Moshe Rabbeinu l'vashalom b'Sinai, that we do it because Hashem commanded us through Moshe on our Sinai. The Rambam says about bris that we don't do it because Adam because of Avraham Avinu. We do it because it's a mitzvah that we got through Moshe Rabbeinu. Similarly over here, even though Moshe spoke about it earlier, but the reason why we do this mitzvah is because we were commanded to do so as part of the 613 mitzvahs at Har Sinai. Und der Vater der Tzivei Avamonas Elokus Fun. Pasuk Anech Hashem Lekecha. Therefore, the commandment to believe in Hashem comes from the Pasuk Anech Hashem Lekecha, which was given to us at Har Sinai. Umi gefindt Zer Gufa, as the Zer itself says, Pkud de Katma Anoichi. Here it says Pkud de Do Katma Lechal. This mitzvah, but in other places in the Zer he says the first mitzvah, which is Anoichi. So even the Zer agrees that Anoichi is the actual mitzvah. Here he's talking in the context of a story, so he says it on the pasuk v'yidaitem. Uns ken kashan is was dem dort manal wegen öfen kiya mitzvah lernen redt from pasuk v'yidaitem ken yeshon lekechem. Did the name out and don't ask. So then why are we learning from v'yidaitem and not from Anech Hashem lekecha? The Zer is learning these details from the word v'yidaitem. But bekam is gefindt men as an inyan from Gili Milsa. Other pratim from a mitzvah learned, we find in other places as well that to get more information about a mitzvah or more details about a mitzvah, it could be learned from before Matan Torah, which means Hashem commanded us to do this mitzvah at Matan Torah, and the reason we do it is because Hashem commanded us to do so. But how do we know all the details of the mitzvah? That sometimes could be learned even before Matan Torah. So the Rambam tells because he's talking about the mitzvahs to us, and he's learning from the Zohar the details from what Moshe Rabbeinu was telling the Yidden in Vayera v'yidaitem k'nei Hashem. So Sif Aleph tells us that the mitzvah of Anech Hashem Lekecha is not just to know that there is Hashem, but to know the pratim. Sif Beis tells us that even the pratim have to be understood, not just accepted as they are, but they have to be learned and understood. Sif Gimel tells us that the makar of the Rambam is from the Zohar, who focuses on the inyan of Lemin Dalei Yediyah, which the Rebbe is translating here Yediyah to mean Yediyah Sichlis, a knowledge that is understood. This will explain to us a question we have on the Rambam. In the second Perek, first Perek, the Rambam speaks about Hashem. Second Perek, the Rambam begins to speak about the mitzvah of loving Hashem and fearing Hashem. The Rambam continues, what's the way, what's the proper path to love Hashem? How does a person come to love Hashem or to fear Hashem? Something that's in front of your face. It looks exciting. It looks attractive. You might love it. Something that looks frightening, you might be afraid of it. But how do you love or fear Hashem? It says the Rambam, person will contemplate in the Eibishter's great and incredible works and creations. And he'll see the Eibishter's wisdom that is infinite and unlimited. Automatically he comes to love Hashem. He sees all the beautiful things that Hashem created. And so too, if he focuses on the awesomeness of Hashem, he will come to, based on what Hashem created, he will come to fear Hashem. Because of this, I'm going to explain to you some major principles in the works of the Master of the Universe, so that it'll be a gateway, an opening for the person who understands us to love Hashem. And then the Rambam spends 3 more prakim. In other words, he starts Perek Beis by saying that the way to love Hashem is by understanding how great Hashem is. Then the Rambam spends Perek Beis, Gimel, and Dalet, the second, third, and fourth Perek, About the Eibishter's incredible creations. Ein Perek wegen Malachim. One Perek, meaning Perek Beis, he speaks about the creation of the angels. There's a tale from Ma'aseh Merkava, which is a part of Ma'aseh Merkava. The Rambam refers to Perek Aleph and Beis as Ma'aseh Merkava. As the Ma'aseh Merkava literally means the works of the chariot. This is a reference to the chariot of Yecheskel. In the Navi Yecheskel, there is a Perek about a vision that Yecheskel had, where he saw the supernal beings, the Eibishter on his throne, etc., etc. And from that point on, when we speak in Kabbalah about the spiritual creations of Hashem, or the things that go on in the spiritual realms, the supernal worlds, we use the term Ma'aseh Merkava, the chariot of Hashem. So the first two prakim are called Ma'aseh Merkava. The first is talking about Hashem. The second is talking about the Malachim, the angels. When you say prakim and then the next two prakim, Perek Gimel and Daled, wegen Ma'aseh Bereishis, about the works of creation. When there's the Rach Messiah, and the Rambam concludes, if a person will contemplate on all of this and recognize the creations of Hashem, this will increase his love to Hashem, and it will enhance his fear of Hashem. So this is what the Rambam is doing in the next few prakim. Is the Chelek move on, and the Rebbe has a seeming question. It's true, as the Rambam says, that the way to love Hashem, to fear Hashem, is through contemplating, through focusing on the creations of Hashem, the works of Hashem. Oh, the Rambam is the Rambam is the halacha sefer. How does it fit in to a sefer of halacha, the various different details about the Eibishter's beautiful creation? As the Yisbein and Adam Ma'asav is nit der Achshem mitzvah, no said Ma'asav mitzvah von Ava. Even though we see from Sefer HaMitzvahs that contemplating about these creations of Hashem is not just the preparation to the mitzvah, but is actually a part in the mitzvah. When we're told love Hashem, it means think about the things that will bring us to love Hashem. The tzivui of an adam, the gavre, is the chefta shenachshav and his bein b'mitzveisav. The mitzvah is upon the person that he should think about and contemplate about the mitzvahs, u'ma'amarav and his teachings, u'pu'leisav and his accomplishments, which this will automatically bring the love of Hashem. So that's why the Rambam is listing all of these things about Hashem, because it's part of what we have to think about in order to love Hashem. It doesn't sufficiently answer our question. As the Fazal, the Rambam reins no besifrim mishotere halachas, the inyani is baranus levachem and kemeiru zayin bazich the chefza avos from Yerushalayim. That the Rambam should include the details of what to think about in order to come to Ava. This belongs in philosophy for him. In other words, they tell us that there's a mitzvah to contemplate the greatness of Hashem that the Rambam has to do, because that's the halacha. You have to think about Hashem. But what are the details that we're supposed to think about? The creation of Hashem. The halacha is says darzan is baranus ma'asav b'ruah and ifloim ge'etzvah. Aber the biurim ma'asav b'ruah and ifloim keren lached nitzu the halacha from mitzvah ava. Seemingly, these details are not part of the halacha. It's part of what we should think about in order to get to ava. But the halacha that we have to think about Hashem in order to come to love Hashem, that is the mitzvah. More than that is not the mitzvah. It's not part of the halacha, and therefore should not have been included in Sefer halachas. In a Sefer of Rambam, which is halachas, is the beer and them. So the Rebbe is now going to explain that according to what we said previously, that to know the details about Hashem is part of the mitzvah Yediyas Hashem. Well, this will be an understanding, an explanation as to why the Rambam includes all of these details about creation in the Sefer of halachas. Is the beer and them. The Yonah was the Rambam Retarum in the Drei Prakim. See you, Ma'aseh Merkava, Ma'aseh Bereishis. These details that Rambam discusses in these three prakim, which is the end of the discussion of Ma'aseh Merkava, of the spiritual supernal beings, and the discussion of creation, that in need not in Yoni is baranus to leave the Greich and the Noch Ha'avas Hashem v'Yiraseh is not just things to contemplate in that will lead to loving Hashem or fearing Hashem, nor is a zayin in the shayich to their mitzvah from Yediyas Hashem. They belong to the mitzvah of knowledge of Hashem. Not only do they belong to that mitzvah, as if they're necessary to bring us to that mitzvah, but they're actually part of this mitzvah. In other words, in the question we thought that the Rambam is bringing them because they're part of the mitzvah of Avos Hashem. Says the Rebbe, no. Avos Hashem, I need them for Avos Hashem, as we'll see in a moment. But if it is just for Avos Hashem, the Rambam would not have brought all these details, because these details, in the midst of Avos Hashem, these details are not part of the halacha. But in the midst of Yedias Hashem, these mitzvahs are part of the halacha. Knowing all these details are part of the fulfillment of the mitzvah of knowing Hashem. Here's Mevayer in Pirush Sefer Rambam, as the Pirush explains in the Sfarim of Rambam, there is a commentary that is titled Pirush. Commentary, it doesn't say the name. So the Pirush says, "V'nichlal tachas yediyah shtei mitzvahs elu." There's a mitzvah to know Hashem. There's a mitzvah that there's no other God besides for Hashem. Part of these two mitzvahs is in Yemaisa Bereshis, is the creation of Hashem, Umaisa Merkava, and the creation of the supernal worlds. Because by knowing them, this will prove that the Eibishter exists. He is the original one and the rock of everything, meaning to say the source of everything. So we see the Pirush very clearly that the mitzvah of Yedias Hashem includes all of these details. The fact that the Rambam continues in Perek Beis Gimel and Dalet to describe the things that the Eibishter created is because all of them are details in the mitzvah of Yedias Hashem, of knowing Hashem. And in the brackets, the Rebbe brings, not the brackets, in the next paragraph, the Rebbe brings 3 rayas from the words of the Rambam that the mitzvah of Yedias Hashem is grouped together with the information that comes in the later prakim, implying that the later prakim are part of the mitzvah of Yedias Hashem. As the inyanim from the 3 prakim are in the hemshech to the inyanim of Yedias Hashem Perek Rishon, that the topics discussed in the next 3 prakim are connected to the mitzvah of Yedias Hashem. Aleph, number 1. In zweiten Perek nach der Arichas wegen Malachim, kehrt sich der Rambam zu weisen, Baruch wie der Rebbe is, after the Rambam elaborates on the existence of the angels. The Rambam returns to discussing Hashem, saying that the Eibishter is Yedeya Atzmei. He knows himself. Yedeya HaKoil. He knows everything. Makir Amita. He recognizes his own truth. Yedeya Isa Kamesha. He knows it as it is. Chulu Hu Yedeya. And then the Rambam brings the description which the Alter Rebbe brings in 2nd Perek of Tanya, Hu Yedeya, Hu Yedua. The Eibishter is the knower. The Eibishter is the information, and the Eibishter is the power of knowledge. So if the Rambam was already done discussing Yedias Hashem, so why after the Malachim, talking about Malachim, is to go back to knowing about Hashem? Clearly, he wasn't done yet. Talking about the Malachim was also part of the mitzvah of Yedias Hashem. Beis. B'Seifa Perek Zakti, at the end of Perek Beis, the Rambam says, Dvarim Elu Shamarnu Ben Yuzeh B'Shnei Prakim. These ideas that were discussed in the last 2 Prakim, Kala Ikrim Sheb'Shnei Prakim Elu, all of these rules, these principles in these 2 prakim, in other words, the first 2 prakim, both together, complete one idea, the Ma'asim Merkava, the creation of the supernal worlds and the spiritual beings. So we see how the Rambam groups together Perek Aleph and Beis, implying that Perek Beis is part of the mitzvah of Yedias Hashem of Perek Aleph. And again, Gimel, the third proof, B'siyum for Perek Dalet, at the end of the 4th Perek Zog the Rambam, V'nyani Arba Prakim Elu, Heim Shekachamim Hashem Keren say Pardes. That all these 4 Prakim were referred to by the Chachamim, by the sages, as the Pardes, the orchard. Aleph Prakim Stone Tzaman Einin in Pardes, all 4 Prakim complete one idea, the Pardes, the orchard, which is a reference to a place where you could learn and know and understand Hashem, the secrets of Hashem, as it says in the Gemara, Arba Nichnasu LePardes, 4 sages went into the Pardes, meaning to say they went to learn the secrets of the Torah. So from the fact that he includes all 4 prakim, both the Ma'aser Merkava, the Ma'aser Bereshis, and the mitzvah of Yedias Hashem, proves that all of these details are all part of the mitzvah of Yedias Hashem. Und das, was der Rambam verbindet, die Klallim Gdelim mit den Jani Yisbarnas, v'chavareng in Tzavas Hashem v'yirasei, und nicht mit die Mitzvahs von Yedias Hashem, v'charetzich in Friedrich and Perek. So in that case, asks the Rebbe, why does the Rambam not say that? Rambam begins as if he's talking about the mitzvah of Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem, and then goes on to discuss all of these details that we're now saying are part of the mitzvah of Yedias Hashem. So the Rebbe answers, weil der Rambam stellt uns die Inyanim von Yedias Hashem, behesem zu die mitzvahs, welchen sie seine Shayach. Knowing Hashem is it leads to loving Hashem and leads to fearing Hashem, etc. So the Rambam lays out the various details of knowing Hashem as they can be applied to other mitzvahs as well. And since these rules, these principles, these ideas are relevant to the mitzvah of loving Hashem and fearing Hashem, the Rebbe tells the Rambam in his own Zayin, nicht nur der Hemmschach zu Frieden Peter Kanal. So the Rambam lays it out in a way that you could utilize it for both. You could learn that there's more to the mitzvah of Yidiyas Hashem, and you could also utilize it to bring you to the mitzvah of Avos Hashem. So you have both mitzvahs. You have both mitzvahs are connected to the same details. So the Rambam lays it out in this way that you could apply them to both. But to say that it's only Avos Hashem and Yiddish Hashem, then the Rambam wouldn't have written it at all, because as they apply to Avos Hashem and Yiddish Hashem, they're not a part of the halacha of Torah. Whereas as they apply to Yiddish Hashem, they are part of the halacha, and that's where the Rambam includes it. And here the Rebbe summarizes what we said till now. And according to this, we can say this is why the Rambam brings these principles in his Sefer Halachas. In order to properly fulfill the mitzvah of knowing Hashem, which means that we have a logical knowledge of what it means, the existence of Hashem and how He exists. For example, that His existence is the most perfect. We have to know all of these other details that the Rambam brings, as we brought earlier from the Pirush, because by knowing these other ideas, this will prove to us that Hashem exists, and He is the first, and that He is the source of everything. So therefore, the Rambam brings it in the Sefer Halachas because it's a part of the mitzvah of Yidiyas Hashem. So very quickly, let's summarize. In Halacha, in Sif Aleph, the Rebbe told us that the mitzvah, according to the Rambam, Yidiyas Hashem means not just that Hashem exists, but to know the details about Hashem. In Sif Beis, the Rebbe told us that these details have to be understood, not just accepted on a level of emunah. In Sif Gimel, the Rebbe told us that the source of this is from the Zohar. In Sif Daled, the Rebbe let me go back myself. In Sifdala, the Rebbe said that this answers the question why the Rambam includes all of the details of Ma'aseh Merkava and Ma'aseh Bereishis in the Rambam, even though it's not really a chelik of the halacha part of Torah. And in Sifei, he answers the question that because the mitzvah of Yidiyas Hashem includes all these details, therefore the Rambam brings them all in a sefer of halachas because they're part of the halacha of Yidiyas Hashem. Now we're going to go to the last halacha of Rambam, and we're going to create this connection between the beginning of Rambam and the end of Rambam. The last halacha of the entire Mishnah Torah at the end of Hilchos Malachim, Melech HaMesayim, Melech HaMashiach, Perek Yud Beis. According to this, we just said till now, that the knowledge about Ma'aseh Merkava and the knowledge about Ma'aseh Bereishis are a part of the mitzvah of Yidiyas Hashem. We can explain better, we can learn deeper the last halacha of Rambam, which is the conclusion of the entire Mishnah Torah. These are the words of the Rambam. At that time, the time of Mashiach, the time of the Geula, the only occupation of the world will be to know Hashem. And therefore, Yidden will be very wise. They're going to know hidden secrets. They're going to understand, they're going to comprehend the knowledge of their Creator as far as humanly possible. As the Pasuk says, the world will be filled with the knowledge of God as this water covers the ocean. The Rebbe has three questions on this halacha. What are the two different things? Dvarim Astumim, the hidden secrets, and Das Beiram, the knowledge of Hashem. What's the difference? And the Rebbe explains. From them was the Rambam is Maktim Lahiyah Esek El Ladas Hashem Bilvad. The halacha begins that the entire occupation is going to be with knowing Hashem. So obviously, we say hidden secrets, we don't just mean hidden secrets about anything else. We mean hidden secrets about Hashem. So what will be the difference between hidden secrets, clearly about Hashem, and the Das Beiram, the knowledge of the Creator? What's the difference? Base, second question. V'namshach lashon Rambam is mashma as the Agbala kifikeach adam atzitzich davke to v'yasigu das beidem aber nitzud v'yedin dvar mastumim. The way that Rambam phrases his halacha, it seems that the term kifikeach adam, as much as humanly possible, refers to the second thing, v'yasigu das beidem, and not to dvar mastumim. For example, as if we would read it like this. They'll be very wise, comma. Comma, they will know hidden secrets. And they'll understand the knowledge of their Creator as far as humanly possible. So why does the Kifikeach Adam apply to Das Beiram and not to Dvar Mastumim? The time of boy, says the Rebbe. We need to understand the reason. Gimel, the third question. What does the end of the pasuk, as water covers the ocean, add to as a proof to what we're discussing? From the fact that it says the world will be filled with the knowledge of God, we know that the world will be occupied with knowing Hashem. Why do we have to add the words Kamayim Liyam Achasim? Nachmer, Eich in Tilchis Tshuva is the Rambam Metari Mesa Mashiach. Also in Tilchis Tshuva, the Rambam describes the time of Mashiach. That in those days, knowledge and wisdom and truth will be increased. As the pasuk says, the world will be filled with the knowledge of God. And he does not bring the end of the pasuk. So we see that Kamayim Liyam Achasim is not so relevant to understand the time of Mashiach. So why in this halacha does the Rambam include the words Kamayim Liyam Achasim? Siv Zayin. And Siv is going to answer the question, and he's going to say that based on the fact that we understand that there's a mitzvah of Yidiyas Hashem, and the mitzvah of Yidiyas Hashem is not just to know that Hashem exists, but to know the details, and the details include both Ma'aseh Merkava and Ma'aseh Bereishis. This will explain to us the difference between Dvarim Mastumim and Das Beiram. As the dictates Mekayim and the mitzvahs of Yidiyas Hashem. You must know both the ideas that are the works of Hashem in the supernal worlds, as well as the works of Hashem in this created world. So we can answer the question that these two ideas of Dvarim Mastumim and Das Beiram are consistent with the two ideas of Ma'aseh Merkava and Ma'aseh Bereishis. Dvarim Mastumim, when you talk about hidden secrets, on them without saying explicitly that we're talking about the Creator. This is referring to the things that Hashem created in this world, in the physical world. Even though these are things that are made up of matter and form, which means to say they're tangible, they're limited, they're still very deep. It's a part of creation that we do not see their necessity, their importance, or their contribution in with our own physical eyes. Why the Eibusher created this and that and the other, and why the Eibusher created this to look like this and that to look like that, and why there's so many different birds and so many different this and so many different parts of creation, with all of the scientific research that has been done about creation, and with this you can create that, and with that you can do this, and there's so much that science has, or that the academics have discovered about creation, we haven't touched upon an iota of it, and certainly not why. And what's the meaning of it? What's the purpose of it? All this is Dvarim Mastumim, Dvarim Amukim. It's deep things. Which the Rambam says you have to have a broad mind to be able to understand the meaning of it all properly. When the Rambam Dvarim Mastumim, and therefore the Rambam calls Dvarim Mastumim. When Mashiach comes, we're going to understand why the Eibusher create so many different insects, why the Eibusher, what's the purpose of each of them, etc., etc. So when the Rambam says Dvarim Mastumim, he means Ma'aseh Bereishis, that we have a mitzvah to know Hashem. The mitzvah includes all the details. Today, our understanding is very, very limited because you need a das rechava, and even today, even if you have a das rechava, it's still there's a very limited amount of knowledge. When Mashiach comes, there's going to be more knowledge. This is Ma'aseh Bereishis, but at the end of the day, since it's creation, it's physical, tangible things, and then understand it is possible to understand it. Just so when Mashiach comes, we'll be able to have a full grasp of Ma'aseh Bereishis. Then the Rambam is telling us that beyond understanding the creation of the world, when Mashiach comes, there's going to be an even loftier understanding. The topics of and the ideas of the creation of the supernal worlds. Because even malachim that are a creation of Hashem, but because they are form without matter, a human being, even after Mashiach comes, a human being which is made up of form and matter, cannot truly comprehend something that has no matter. So a human being cannot fully understand the creation of a malach. Certainly, the knowledge of the Creator is the zicher v'derambam is mevayas. It's nicht shaykh as an adam hachai shu mechuber v'guf nefesh. So masik dan amit zimatzi kashahi. It's impossible for a human being, says the Rambam, which is made up of a body and soul, to be able to truly comprehend the truth of the Eibishter's existence. Und der Farm was the Rambam makes sein wie sie gut das Beidem kifike echad, and therefore I must add the words to as far as humanly possible, because since das Beidem means Ma'aseh Merkava, and Ma'aseh Merkava are things that are out of our intellectual grasp. Even when Mashiach comes, when we're going to understand a lot more than we understand today, it's going to be a lot less than it is actually there, because of the limitations of the human mind. So this answers two questions. What's the difference between Dvarim Astumim and Das Beidam? Dvarim Astumim is Ma'aseh Bereishis, and Das Beidam is Ma'aseh Merkava. And why by Ma'aseh Merkava does he say Kifikeach Adam? Because even though when it comes to Ma'aseh Bereishis, when Mashiach comes, we'll be able to fully understand it, because at the end of the day we're talking about physical creations. Nevertheless, when we just talk about Ma'aseh Merkava, even when Mashiach comes, we can never fully, truly grasp the entirety of it, and therefore we can only go as far as humanly possible, and therefore the Rambam says the words Kifikeach Adam. What remains to answer on this Rambam is why the Rambam adds the words Kamayim Liam Mechasim, and for this we're going to go into a conversation, Sivches and Tes and Yud, to discuss the difference between the knowledge of Ma'aseh Bereishis and the knowledge of Ma'aseh Merkava. Piece of Nechverstehen, was the Rambam bringt him Siyum HaKos of Kamayim Liam Mechasim. According to this, we'll understand why the Rambam also adds the words Kamayim Liam Mechasim. Ubahaktim, let us first preface. The difference between Ma'aseh Merkava, the works of the chariot, which is the spiritual creations, and the works of creation, as the Rambam says, as the Inyanim of Ma'aseh Bereishis, Einom ki inyan oimek from the Inyanim Ma'aseh Merkava, are not as deep as the works of the Eibishter's creation are not as deep as the works of the Ma'aseh Merkava. As far as the halacha and afkamina ladina, in the meifim v'dershim Ma'aseh Merkava, other Ma'aseh Bereishis can be word b'Rambam, and therefore there's actually a practical halachic relevance, that there's a difference in when you teach Ma'aseh Merkava, which a person has to be much more learned, much more advanced, versus when you teach Ma'aseh Bereishis, because since the Ma'aseh Merkava is much deeper, therefore who you teach it and when you teach it, etc., is more complicated. And this, when we say that it's much deeper, it's not just quantitatively, as in Yoni Ma'aseh Merkava and Yusir Amukim, in Yoni Ma'aseh Bereishis, that they're just a deeper concept. Nor says it's qualitatively different as well. How you're going to learn it, how you're going to understand it is different. Ma'aseh Bereishis, the works of creation, since they're actually part of creation, you could actually look at it, you could see it, you could put it under a microscope, you can. There's something that you're working with. You could actually understand it in knowing what it is, not just knowing what it's not, but as we'll see soon, but knowing what it is. When we discuss the supernal creations, which are things that are in the parameters of Creator, you can't know what it is. It's impossible, because you talk about things that are beyond human comprehension. We could know what it's not. There's a way to know something by figuring out what it is. There's a way to know something by process of elimination. So I don't know, I can't define it, but the closest definition I have is that it's not this or that. Like the Rambam is going to speak in a minute. When you say the Eibishter is a chacham, what does it mean? It means that he's not a chacham. But what does it mean chacham? The Gemara today brings in Tanya. We can't understand what it means the Eibishter is a chacham. We don't know what chacham is. We don't know what the Eibishter is. So the best we could do is we're using human terms to understand that the Eibishter cannot be excluded from being a chacham. But what that means, what does it mean that the Eibishter is a chacham? We don't know. So that's the difference. Ma'aseh Bereishis is yisachiyuv. We can define what it is. We can see exactly what it is. We can study it. We can research it. We can explain what it is. Ma'aseh Merkava can only be understood by process of elimination, by knowing what it's not. The Rambam elaborates in Meir Nevuchim as often Eibishten is neshayach zu sagen kein Terim chiyuviyim nor bleis Terim shlila. That on Eibishter you can only describe him by what he's not. The dogma does was man sagt after Eibishten chacham. For example, when we call the Eibishter chacham, meit nor as mishelo from him also say chacham. It only means we're eliminating anything that's not chachma. The Eibishter say Eibishter like a giber, strong. We understand what the Eibishter's strength is. We know that you can't take away from Hashem any form of Gourarie. Whatever Gourarie might mean, it applies to Hashem. But what it actually is, we don't know. And therefore, when it comes to understanding Hashem and understanding the Ma'aseh Merkava, the best we can do is to understand Hashem by the process of elimination. Even though that too is considered knowledge. The Rambam says that by continuously eliminating all the things that he's not, this will bring you closer to understand what it is and closer to Hashem. Or another quote from the Rambam, that all of these descriptions of what he isn't will bring you closer to knowing Hashem, to understanding Hashem. So when we say Yediyas Hashlila, it's still a Yediyah. Von deswegen afilu bei dem Hechsten von den Sagas Hashlila is das Nita Sage im Husabeda. That Amitis, when we say, nevertheless, as far as we go, as many times as you go through the elimination process, you still will never have a full grasp in the existence, in the definition of the Creator. At the end of the day, when the truth of the Eibishter's existence remains concealed from our understanding. This is a very important, not that when we talk about Yediyas Hashem, it's a mitzvah to know Hashem. And the mitzvah of Yediyas Hashem includes Sai, Ma'aseh Merkava, and Sai Ma'aseh Bereishis. But when it comes to Ma'aseh Bereishis, we have an obligation to know Yediyas Achiv, to know what it is. And when it comes to Ma'aseh Merkava, we have a chiyuv to know it, but only through Yediyas Hashlila, only by process of elimination, because we can never humanly comprehend the essence of the existence of Hashem, or the definition of the existence of Hashem. And based on this, on this differentiation between Ma'aseh Merkava and Ma'aseh Bereishis, the knowledge of Hashem versus the knowledge of creation, we will now be able to understand a diuk, a nuance in the Rambam. It's actually very, very gishmak. When again, Ma'aseh Merkava is like the Rambam, when the Rambam describes Ma'aseh Merkava, the various different spiritual creations, the Rambam says, everything that we told you about this, in these two prakim Aleph and Beis, it's like a drop in the ocean. And what we could really truly talk about on this topic. Whereas when the Rambam discusses the creation of the world, everything that we discuss is like a drop in a bucket. So the Ma'aseh Merkava says a drop in the ocean. When it comes to Ma'aseh Bereishis, it's a drop in a bucket. But based on this, we can understand very clearly, since the knowledge of the Rebbe will explain, but in short, the Rebbe is going to explain that the knowledge of Ma'aseh Bereishis is something that's attainable, and therefore we call it a drop in a bucket, because a bucket is attainable. Whereas the Ma'aseh Merkava is not attainable in its fullest sense, and therefore he calls it a drop in an ocean, which an ocean is infinite. The ideas of creation are limited. Because they're in the creation, and the creation is limited, and therefore everything that's inside of creation is limited. Even though the Rambam is just giving you general ideas and general pointers, therefore it's only a drop. But it's like the comparison between a drop and a bucket. It's true that the drop compared to the bucket is a tiny little bit, but the amount of water that goes into a bucket is greatly limited. So it's in comparison to an ocean, a bucket is tiny. But by the Ma'aseh Merkava in the spiritual creations, Rambam says it's a drop in the ocean, because the ocean represents infinity. unlimited. Bizas ba'halacha is yam vert ungedu from mayim shein lemsof. In halacha, the Rambam is referred to as, in halacha, the yam is referred to as something that does not have an end. And in truth, the water in the ocean is a finite amount of water. As the Gemara says, it's possible to estimate how many drops there are in the ocean. But the fact that in halacha, the yam, ocean is referred to as water that has no end. This proves that the incredible quantity of water in the ocean is that we could call it unlimited, and therefore when we say we mean that this is just a drop of something that is inherently unlimited. Means it's a drop of something but that has an end. So ultimately it is attainable. Where we take we mean it's a drop of something that actually is unattainable in the end. It's unlimited. And we're still on this topic of the unlimited parameters of the ocean. There's a passage that says that all the rivers lead to the sea, and the sea is still not full. As a yam is came on the which means the ocean is never full. The reason that we call the ocean water that has no end, even though technically it is quantifiable, he says, can in em arain und bekayach is in em da mayim believable. It's because you can always put more water in, and therefore potentially there's an unlimited amount of water. The waters of the ocean are in actuality limited, and it is known, at least in the Gemara, how to measure, how to estimate the drops in the ocean. Or bekayach, but potentially is that yam nit mali midialatipes. The ocean is not even full of all the drops, and it's not for mayim shein themselves. There's room for more water, and there's a room for an unlimited amount of water. And since these topics about the creation of Hashem is unlimited and higher than the parameters of creation, they are an idea of yam. It's something that is unlimited, and therefore the Rambam says it's like a drop in the ocean, because really these topics, these ideas, can go unlimited. So this is the Hakdama. The question began in Sivches, why does the Rambam say the words Kamayim Liyom Mechasim? So the Hakdama was, we have to understand that we're talking about two different types of knowledge. The Ma'aser Merkava is attainable, and therefore he calls it Gemar Midli, like a drop in a bucket. But Ma'aser Bereshis is attainable. Ma'aser Merkava is unlimited. It's not fully, truly attainable because it's beyond, and therefore the Rambam says Ketipa Min Hayam. Now let's go back to Kamayim Liyam Mechasim. Alpiza is moving as the Rambam is Meisif B'Seif Sifrei D'B'Siyum Akasa Kamayim Liyam Mechasim. And this explains how the Rambam adds these words as water covers the ocean. The Rambam is hinting to the fact as based on Yom Adam, since in those times, the times of Mashiach, you will be able to comprehend the knowledge of Hashem as far as humanly possible. But since at the end of the day, this is the knowledge of the Creator. It always remains higher than the creation. Like water covers the ocean. He'll only be able to grasp it by the process of elimination and not by the knowledge of what it is. So therefore the Rambam is saying, Hashem, the world will be filled with the knowledge of God. That's going to be the entire occupation of the world. But there are some parts that are Kamayim Liyam Mechasim that we could only know in a certain way, just like water covers the ocean. So too, some of this is covered from us, it's concealed from us, and it is not humanly possible to understand. So in other words, the words Kamayim Liyam Mechasim are sort of a raya to the part of Kfikei Adam that Rambam brought earlier. Mikol Anal, this all teaches us a lesson about the importance of learning all of this information. The Rambam writes at the beginning of his Sefer. As in Sefer all of the mitzvahs, the Rambam included all the mitzvahs that are fundamental to the religion of Moshe Rabbeinu. And a person has to know this at first. Referring to the things that are discussed in Sefer Hamada, they are necessary to be known first in order to learn everything else. Was the fullness verstandig when it gets to Sefer Hamada Gufa, as the Yonim was the Rambam of the Gishal Bereich Sefer Hamada, and from this we'll understand that within the Sefer Hamada Gufa, the things that the Rambam puts at the beginning of Sefer Hamada and refers to them as Yisro Torah, the foundations, the fundamentals of Torah, have to be learned first before we learn all the other topics. Sefer Hamada. Certainly we have to know these Yisro Torah before we go into the other 13 Svarim of the Rambam. And within the halachas that are Yisro Torah, the fundamentals of Torah, first and foremost, you have to know the foundation of the foundations and the pillar of the wisdom. Since all of these four prakim that are relevant to these 5 mitzvahs, to know Hashem, to love Hashem, to fear Hashem, to believe in Hashem, and I don't remember what the 5th one is at this moment. All these things and all these 4 prakim are necessary to fulfill this mitzvah properly. To learn in the inyanim b'chlal. To have a maktim sein dem limut von die inyanim for dem limut von andere inyanim Torah. So the Rabbi is learning a very practical lesson over here. The Rambam structured it in a certain way. The first you have 14 Svarim of Rambam. Mada comes first because Mada has to be learned first, and Hilchas Yisro Torah has to be learned first. That's why the Rambam puts that first. And before that, you have Yisro Torah. That's the beginning. So when this is a practical lesson, that when we start learning Torah, the most important part to start with are these halachas about the knowledge of Hashem. He says, but the Rambam says, I have a question. The Rambam says, that I say, person should not stroll in the orchard unless he already satiated himself with meat and, with bread and meat, which the pardes refers to the knowledge of Hashem. The meat and the bread is leida asav amut. Havayis of Abaya Nava. Person should learn Gemara, person should learn the questions and answers in the Gemara, person should learn halacha, know what's us, know what's mutter, and only then should you go into the orchard to explore these more metaphysical things about Hashem, about creation. As the Yonim von Pardes, this part of the halacha of the Rambam implies that first you should learn halacha, and then you should learn these ideas of Yediyas Hashem. If you say to me, is there more than that? The question is deeper. The Rambam writes, first the person should learn Teresh B'Ksav. Then he will learn this sefer of the Rambam Mishnah Torah. And he'll know the entire Torah, the entire oral Torah. And he doesn't have to learn anything in between. You can learn from Bereshis until Chumash Dvarim. Then you go straight to Mishnah Torah, the Rambam, and you have everything you need to have. No, Teresh B'Ksav, let it be nicht sharas from Teresh B'Peh. After Teresh B'Ksav, we're not learning anything else. And we're not learning Gemara, the questions of Abaye and Rava, and we're not filling up our stomach with bread and meat, meaning to say the various different parts of halachas of Torah. No, the erste Zach was the Rambam learned with is Ma'aser Mekar Ma'aser Bereshis. And when we open up Mishnah Torah, what do we get? Ma'aser Mekar Ma'aser Bereshis, the creation of the world, the things that Hashem did. So why does the Rambam say Perek Dalet that you have to first Milah Kneisai? First you have to learn halacha. If the Rambam is telling you that you don't have to learn anything between Chumash and the Rambam, and the Rambam starts not with Havayis to Abaye v'Rava or the halachas of Torah, but with Ma'aser Mekar Ma'aser Bereshis. Zois ve'ed, the Dalet prakim of the Rambam reingestellt besifrei Vilchen and back to Moshe das ist lakarten v'lagadol. These 4 prakim the Rambam puts in to his sefer, which the Rambam writes in his preface, in his introduction. that it's geared for the minor, for the person with very little knowledge of Torah, or for the person that has a lot of knowledge of Torah. And certainly this katan is not someone that's well advanced in the knowledge of Torah. So the Rabbi is asking from in Sif Yud Beis and Sif Yud Aleph, from the Sikha that we just learned at length, it is understood, it is implied that the first and most important thing for a person to learn is to know the existence of Hashem, and to know about the existence of Hashem, to know the pratim, to understand these various details. And that's how the Rambam structures it, that he starts his sefer with these halachas. So why does the Rambam then say that you shouldn't stroll in the orchard until you've satiated yourself with the halachas of Torah? Is there beer in them? The Rebbe answers in Sif Yud Gimel. We have to look at the precision of the Rambam's wording. It says l'tayel. Tayel means to stroll. It is mishana from Lashon Chazal. Was bringt da gufa nichnesu lepardes. In Chazal it says that the four sages, they entered into the orchard. The Rambam says you shouldn't stroll in the orchard. L'tayel meint klal nit areingehen. Nor sein in pardes barichis u'ba'efen shel tiul tainuk. L'tayel doesn't mean to just go in. It means to spend time there leisurely, to enjoy yourself. Sich zu eisig sein in die Inyanim mit ha'izbarinus amuku u'rachava, which would mean to delve into these topics, to their length and to their breadth. Bis as sich misanig in die Sachen, so that he could revel in these ideas. Und der Eifen alimud in pardes darf sein erst nachdem wie in the smaller kreise lechel basar. And this type of going into the orchard, to spend time there, to learn it, to enjoy it, etc. For that, you have to first satiate yourself with the bread and the meat. In addition to the fact that the Rambam says that the earlier sages said to not discuss these things in public. Because once you're going deeper into these things, it requires an incredible amount of knowledge and an incredible amount of wisdom, and therefore, first you have to satiate yourself with the knowledge of Torah, and only then can you go explore these ideas. But the topics that are discussed in the first four parakim of Rambam, which are written without too much elaboration. As the Rambam himself emphasizes that this is just a drop in the ocean. Or similarly, with regards to creation, that he's only giving you a drop of the bucket. They're not even in the category of the bullet points. Because even the bullet points, even the main points are not supposed to be taught in public, certainly not lekatan v'lagadol. So if the Rambam includes them in halachas, it's because it's not even Rashi Prakim, it's a drop of a drop of the ocean. Now, Blaze ideas clearly as you say is it's only giving you general information, but fundamental information. But to find this cloud together from l'tayel b'pardes, therefore it's not in the category of l'tayel b'pardes to stroll in the orchard, which is why the Rambam can start with it. So therefore, in other words, if you want to know the order of learning, is first you have to know the basics that are discussed in these four parakim in the Rambam, the basic general knowledge about Hashem, about the creation of Hashem, and the things that the Eibishter created in this world and in the supernal worlds. Then you have to learn the halachas of Torah, and you have to learn the havayis of Abaye and Rava, etc. And then you could go to be Mitayel B'Pardes. You can go explore the orchard, which is to go much, much deeper into the knowledge of Hashem. When you get some limit from the Inyanim in dem Eifin, the idea is clearly is the Rambam stellt say specific is Adarabba. Das muss man lernen Tchilas Hakel. On the other hand, these things that the Rambam does bring in these four parakim should be learned first. They are at the beginning of everything. While you say this Vamud HaChachmis is because the foundation of all foundations and the pillar of all wisdom is Amud Al-Haben HaYediyah and the Mebishtin to know Hashem. When the Andra Allah has a Torah Shtein of them Amud and all the rest of Torah stand on this pillar. When the Amiyus of them Yisayid and are founded on this foundation. Durch the Mesik Itzt in the Inyan of Hashem, and by preoccupying ourselves now with knowing Hashem, we will merit speedily the days of Mashiach, when, as the Rambam says, the world will be occupied only with knowing Hashem. In other words, if we start now, then this hastens the coming of Mashiach when we will see the true fulfillment of this. As the world will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, as the ocean is covered in water.